group of individuals so far. Fascinating conversation from Alexandra. That was brilliant. It's something which I've suffered or been through many, many times. My presentation, I think Ren's going to start in a minute, but if give me 2 minutes, Ren, and then I'll tell you when to kick off. So just to give everyone a bit of background, I have done 8 to 10 startups. I've been CEO or founder for the last 20 years. For one way or another during my career, I've worked in the UK, India, China, Hong Kong, Romania, Australia, Mexico, Latvia, Canada. And I've been fortunate that I've been involved in building companies as CEO, as a founder, but also invested personally in about personally and or with corporates in 30 plus companies on multiple continents, and also worked with some great funders, either backing me or exiting to Atlas Ventures, Texas Pacific Group, Matrix, Nexus Partners, Sequoia, Oak Hill Capital. Recently, I exited an investment to Ola, and all very interesting. But just to put some context into this and not wanting to be too controversial, I remain super skeptical about corporate investors. I remain super skeptical about private equity and venture capital, not because they're not useful, but I think, as Alexandra was saying, the expectation of failure is not there. The expectation that it takes a long time to get things right is just not there. And you've got a lot of investors who really are not grounded enough to understand what's really required. So I'm going to put some slides up, or Ren's going to put some slides up, because I've sort of lost my presentation. Brilliant, super, that's excellent. So I'm just going to just ask you to move slides over when I'm ready. So the question around investing, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what scale you are, which country you are. The core principles remain the same, which also is the reasons why investments don't work. The reasons for success are mirrored by the reasons for failure. And Alexandra's very specifically said, about some of these. Think about yourself, your personal investments. Forget the corporate investments. Forget the money side. Think about your personal time investment. It's whether you are happy with that time investment or the personal investment or anything other investment. The success is always delivered by expectations. There's a great book by Mo Gaudat, who's the Google ex CXO there, and it's about happiness is a function of expectation management. So unless it's a unicorn, VCs are upset. Everything's not a unicorn. Everything's not a unicorn. Where are the days have gone when a 10x investment was good enough without it being a unicorn? So I think that dictates how people view an investment, and that dictates how people view success, and it's really important. I have, in a corporate environment, been on both sides of transactions, been acquiring companies, and have been on the other side where we've sold out to companies. And it's really interesting to figure out what happens post the deal. Either you walk away happy and you have a hard stop, or you want what you've created to be successful. I want to be able to drive down GT Road MG Road just outside New Delhi, look at that building and remember the good times I had and what a great exit it was. I think that's really important, because it's about a legacy. Because if you have a good experience as either an investor or an investee, you will promote that experience. If you have a horrible experience, particularly as an invested company, you're not going to look fondly, and it's not going to develop the ecosystem. So let's go through some of the slides and some of the high-level thoughts I always have when looking at investments. They all starts with the letter P. So firstly, if you're looking for investment or you're looking to invest in a company, is there purpose? I mean, is there a reason? Is it some kids who say they want to make a bunch of money? That's a purpose, but that's never going to last long. That's never going to give you a sustainable core part of the business which you can build on. Is there a mission? I mean, a long-term mission to make a difference, or to change the way Alexandra's business was saying around how you just take away issues within a company? Does that mission, which may be a long-term goal, lead to a vision The vision being really identifiable, quantifiable deliverables. I will, in 5 years, do this, because that supports a mission. And therefore, if the mission can be distilled into a vision, you get a sense that the entrepreneurs have a bigger picture. They wake up every morning thinking about the big picture, but they're dictated by the short-term vision. At Sparx Learning, we have a mission, and the mission is around making a difference in education. The vision is very specific about the number of learners whose life opportunities we want to change. So there's very clear distinction between that. But underpinning all of that, it's values. I cannot stress you enough how important values are. Values are when you're doing a deal, when you're doing an acquisition, you don't think it's an acquisition. If you think it's an acquisition, or if you think you're doing an investment, that's a first problem. That's the first thing that goes wrong. If you're thinking about it as a true partnership and you have value alignment, that's what makes a great deal. When you can have a cup of coffee, a tea, or a beer with the company you're going to invest in, the company you're going to acquire, and feel like your family, then you can work together. Otherwise, it's a really black and white transaction. That's not my thing. Other people may be their thing. That's what they do. It's not my thing. So let's get the purpose right. Next slide, please. The next most important thing is the people. I always say, the top 3 priorities of doing a deal is always people, people, people. That is what you're acquiring in most businesses. And there are exceptions, and I'll give you, there are exceptions, but mostly you're acquiring a set of skills. Either they have built a great business, they have the passion, they have the network, they have the understanding of how that piece works, and they can bring the skills, and there's an overlap of values. We did the same thing at Sparx Learning a few years ago when we got into a partnership with Hegarty, our biggest competitor at the time. But there was no doubt in my mind the reason we were doing this is because we love the people. We love working with that team. They're now a core part of my team at Sparx, and it was really important to get that right, because there's an old saying, if you have a company or an organization where you have a poor team, they can really screw up a good company. But if you have a great team, they can take an average company and make it a rocket success. So always focus on what you want in terms of the people. And it is a function of, and I'll take the fact that it is a function of whether you are an investor and buying just a company, whether you're a corporate and buying a company to slot into another organization. I mean, if that's the case, if you are a corporate and buying a company to slot into your organization, the people generally become important, not necessarily of the company you acquire, but the people around that acquisition that's going to take it and make it bigger and better. Next slide, please, Renan. Then look at the product. Understand what the product or the service offering is. Really understand it. How was it developed? And I'm going to refer back to Alexandra. I think we should definitely talk to Alexandra. Don't develop something and then start looking for the problem. That's wrong way around. Don't find something and then look for the problem. Figure out where the problem is and then solve it. Ask the question. I hear so many times when people create some fantastic product, but it's not solving a problem. Then they go out hunting for a problem. Don't do it do it the other way around. Make sure you really understand the market. Seek the evidence as much as you can to make sure that you are solving that problem. Make sure you have strong USPs. Make sure you really do stand out in the market. Go to the market quick, but make sure you stand out from the market. And that's where the value will be. But make sure you take feedback. The product does not work and stand alone once. It has to be iterated every month, every quarter, every year. No product stays static. And that's a golden rule. MPS, talk to the clients all the time. Keep filling in those gaps. It is not a case of building something and hoping it will work. Next slide, please. But also look at the potential of the market. How big is the market? Now, I'm based in the UK. UK, relatively in most sectors, is a fairly small market. So if you don't wake up in the morning and have an international vision every single day for everything, you're looking at a fairly constrained market. It's important for market sizing, which is really good if you're investing or if you're seeking investment, to understand what the potential is for you to grow. But it's also to understand the channels and understand where you could end up going, what kind of market it is, what the value dynamics are, and who you are going to be interfering with, who are you interrupting, who are you displacing. I think to that, you really need to understand the potential of the opportunity. And that's where you really need to look outside your core skill set, outside your core team, bring in people who have access to visibility to that market. Talk to the competitors, become involved in the whole ecosystem to really understand those opportunities, be they be direct to business, direct to consumer, some other route to get to your end user. I think that's really important to understand what that quantum is, because if you know what the potential of the market is, you can plan. You can plan really clearly in terms of how you want to scale or grow over how many years to make sure you can really capture the best part of that market. Next slide, please. And ultimately then, from a commercial perspective, you need real strong predictability. Golden rule of to ensure not failing is make sure the bills are paid, make sure the revenue keeps coming in. No cash flow, no business. I have done a lot of startups, and there's been a lot of times when you're worried about the next payroll, not anything more strategic than, will I be able to pay the bills next month, next quarter? And that is a function of making sure you're structured where the top line revenue is predictable. Not one-off revenues. One-off revenues are useful, but long-term sustainable revenues. That's a function of having a great product, which all the stuff we talked about earlier, great product, great USPs. Excuse me, sorry. Alexa, stop. See, Alexa interfering. And therefore, what you need is long-term sustainable revenues, good renewals. Good renewals means good success. And in education, it's particularly important. Don't create something in any sector and go start selling. Make sure it's embedded, it works, do the research, because once you do that, then you can have a mind to predictability. Then you can have a sense of what the renewals should be. You know, therefore, if investors are saying, oh, please invest in sales and marketing, invest in sales and marketing, you have to pause and say, no, no, no. The first thing I want to invest in is make sure the research is right, make sure the product is right, make sure my customers like it. If that's the case, I will get renewals. If I get renewals, I have long-term sustainability. But if I do marketing first on a bad product, nothing this will happen, and investor gets upset, you get upset, there's nothing else on the other side, and you don't have any predictability, and ultimately that leads to failure. Next slide, please. And also make sure you are open to partnerships. You cannot do everything. You cannot pretend to do everything. You can't get lost in that. If it's not made here, it's not good enough. You need partnerships. You need partnerships to sell, partnerships to deliver services into your startup or your organization, and the ability to partner outside your organization to come up with joint propositions. And that's a mindset thing. That's trying to make sure you get into a mindset where you understand that you are not the master of the whole ecosystem. You need to work with other partners, and there's a particular mindset. You've got to be open. You can't be restricted. You need to have the ability to have a team around you, or yourself as the lead. You can pick up those relations, make sure you can extend it. It's a classic case of making sure, and startups and lots of companies forget that, you may think you're restricted in finance to do this and do that. The reality is sometimes you don't need to do it yourself. You have people out there who can do it for you. And that's a great way to not waste money in developing aspects of your business, which is not core. And you've got to understand what is core for you, but you may understand what's not core for you. Next slide, please. And then you need to understand what your position is. That's really important to understand how you articulate both internally and externally. And I always use this example of the triangle, and I didn't get enough time to get this done as a triangle. It's around either your product focus, like Apple. Apple, don't really listen to us as customers, to be honest. I'm sure there's someone from Apple online. We love Apple. Not sure Apple loves us. Apple tell us about things. We would never have thought about a smartphone. We would never have come up with a smartphone if Steve Jobs had said, what do you want? We would have said a better phone, not a smartphone. And so Apple is very, very product focused. Then there's customer focus. Body Shop, really about understanding what the customer needed. They drove that whole sustainability aspect. They drove the kind of particular service offering that the customer wanted from a particular plant-based products. And that was very much high bespoke product. Or there's the operating model, let's make it really efficient, let's cheap as cheerful. We again, as customers, live with that, because we know people who want to go from the UK to Spain and it costs £100. Well, that's fine, because they operate a really sharp operating model. And if you know where you are, you don't have to be in each one of those corners of that triangle. You can be product and customer, product and operating, but you need to understand where you are. That dictates a lot of things internally and externally. External positioning, marketing, focus, internal organizational structure, development, etc. I think that's probably the end of my slide. I don't know, Rene, if I've got another slide. No, that's where I am. Please, if you want to reach out to me, drop me a note, follow me on Twitter. But hopefully that gives you a summary of what my experience has been on both sides and what I think is really important. Omar, thank you very much.